He's here. Here is somewhat. He's in the general vicinity.
All right, we're good technically. Ms. Rivers, are you ready? Mr. Abate, anything before we bring the jury back in and continue Ms. Fagan's cross-examination of Investigator Barry? Mr. King?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Fagan?
No, Your Honor.
You're ready to go?
Yes, Your Honor.
Excellent. Let's bring the jurors in, please. And Mr. Rao, if you could click the got it button on the podium. Can you press the, great, thank you.
All right, with the juror. Jurors are further accountable.
Thank you, Deputy. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, from Friday lunch. Appreciate your patience. Had a meeting here in court while you guys were off getting lunch, talking about the next things we're going to try in here. The fun never stops in Fulton County. When we stopped, Ms. Fagan was in the midst of her cross-examination of Investigator Barry, and I'm inviting her to continue that.
All right, good afternoon.
And Investigator Barry, I know you know this, but so it's clear on the record, you remain under oath.
Yes, sir.
I want to discuss a couple things that were mentioned on your direct with the state. One was that you noticed that Javante on the video was shooting in the same direction as the two individuals shooting from the hill.
Correct.
And would you agree that Javante was not shooting in the air? Well, you stated on your direct that Javante was not shooting on the air, correct?
Correct.
Okay, because in your vision, you see Javante shooting straight?
Correct.
Now, when you've seen the autopsy,
Yes, I have the report.
and in the autopsy, you see that a 380 broke Solo's leg.
It was a 380. It was confirmed on the report that a 380 broke his leg.
Have you seen the report?
I'm gonna object for also speculation as to this witness, but
Well, I think you're detecting there's some confusion here, so I'm going to let you explore it.
Okay. And you're lead detective on this case, correct?
Correct.
So you collected the whole file, correct?
Yes, including the report.
From the medical examiner.
Correct.
And in that medical examiner report, you saw two penetrating gunshot wounds.
In the leg.
No.
But it wasn't, I didn't get confirmation that it was a 380.
Okay, so you never got the GBI ballistics?
It never came back to me, no.
Okay, so then just on the autopsy, not about the types of bullets.
Okay.
Just, there was one in the leg, right?
Correct.
And that was the front of his leg, right? The
Correct.
left thigh.
It was
or left shin.
2 shots in the leg. One was in the shin, one was in the leg. I understand the one that was in that upper thigh was that fatal shot. That's
Okay.
what was explained to me.
So are you aware that he was actually shot in the back?
No.
Okay. So you're not aware he wasn't shot in the leg twice?
The two in the, I understood 2 in the leg. One in the upper thigh was the fatal shot, and another one at the lower part of the leg. Not familiar about the back.
Okay. Okay, so okay. Now, when you first met Javante Rivers on your direct, you stated that he said it wasn't his fault.
Correct.
You stated that he said he had nothing to do with it.
Yes,
And later on, you determined that wasn't true, right?
that's right.
And you ultimately arrested him for murder.
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about just your investigation in this case. You met with a Kiana Clark.
Yes.
You met with a Helen Abraham,
Yes.
Rhea Thompson,
Correct.
Kiera Cleot,
Yes.
And when they refer to the keys, they mentioned Kiki to you.
Yes. I believe there was more than one Kiki though. You have Clat, the one who left the debit card on scene, and Clark, because it's Kiana. So there was like two Kikis.
Okay. And one Kiki was in the vehicle with Javante and Jakayla.
Is this before or after? the
Okay.
incident?
So I'm in the midst of the shooting. There's a Kiki in that car, correct?
In Ria's car?
No. Do you recall Yola's girlfriend?
Yola.
Do you recall Yola?
Yeah, I remember that name.
And Yola was also being promoted by Sola.
He had a red shirt on?
I don't recall.
Okay.
But there was a Yola.
Okay.
And
It
Yola-
sounds familiar.
And Yola had a girlfriend named Kiki.
Okay.
And Kiki also shot out of that car.
Okay.
Your Honor, I'm gonna object. We have-
Yeah, so I want to make sure that we're not having Ms. Fagan testify and you're saying that's what you're saying. If you are remembering something, yes, I know that fact, but the dialogue needs to not be, I appreciate you're saying that, but I know nothing about it.
I don't know
So,
anything about that.
okay.
Do you recall your interviews? Well, you recorded every interview you did, right?
Yes.
And you recorded that so that defense and prosecution could prepare.
Yes.
And in your recordings, you recorded your conversations with Jakayla and Javante
Yes.
on 4 occasions.
I know for sure on scene.
Piedmont,
And then 2 times in their home.
and then one time they met you at a parking lot and got in your car.
Okay. Well, yes.
Okay. And it wasn't until the third time, the second time you went to the house, the third time you met them, the third time you confronted them for lying.
That's correct.
And once you confronted them for lying, that's when they admitted to shooting.
Mr.
When you
Rivers.
say they, who's the they admitted to shooting?
Mr. Rivers.
Mr. Rivers admitted to
shooting.
shooting.
Yes.
And Mr. Rivers told you that he only shot once initially
Yes.
in the air, right?
Yes.
And then he admits to saying he shoots twice.
Yes.
And then he says he shoots and he passes the gun to Kiki.
At first he said he just left the gun. And then at some point, yes, he said he gave the gun back to a female.
And on the video, you see where there's a muzzle flash from the passenger side
From whose vehicle?
from Jakayla's.
If we had to play that back. The only one I know that was shooting on around Jakayla's vehicle was Mr. Rivers and the other 2 suspects in this case. That's the only 3 shooters that I saw.
That you saw.
That's correct.
But Javante told you that he gave the gun to Kiki and Kiki shot in the air once.
Yes,
I didn't
that
see
happened.
that.
No, that happened.
I didn't see it in the video.
Okay. My
Oh,
question
yeah,
is,
if he told me, I can't recall if he said it either.
okay. I am now approaching you. Would it help if you refresh your recollection on your interview with Jakayla and Javante from the second time you went to the house?
Yes, it'll help. Thank you. Okay. Whose brother?
Your Honor, can we just?
Hold on, let's figure out where that came from. It went away. What was your question?
Can we inquire as to what is being used to refresh?
Sure, if you could let Mr. Abate know so he can either see it before you share it, or if he's got a copy, he can look at it.
It's a transcript from the interview at the second time she went to the house at 45 minutes into the interview.
Now look at it.
You can put. Mhm. Is your recollection refresh?
Oh, I didn't get to
Okay,
finish.
so you recall your interview was with Javante Jacala,
Okay,
correct?
brothers Javante? Okay, yes. All right. Okay, yes, I recall. Here you go.
So you recall when you were sitting with them, they told you that Kiki shot too,
Yes,
and that Kiki was in the front seat or the back seat?
passenger seat.
Front seat.
Yes.
Now, after, so that was your third interview, then you met them at the car, and am I correct in saying that is when Jacala gave you the picture from Instagram
No, I had that prior
from Will Lewis?
prior
Okay.
to that. Yes.
And then, so that's the fourth time you met them.
Yes.
And then you meet them. Were you present when Javante got arrested?
I interviewed him, but I wasn't there when he was arrested.
Okay, so you interviewed him, and that was the fifth interview.
That's correct.
Now, when you interviewed Jacala and Javante, they were cooperative. They wanted to talk, correct?
Yes,
But they were not telling you the truth, right?
that's correct.
Now, when Will Lewis met with you, he didn't want to cooperate, right?
That's right.
But he told you the truth, right?
Yes.
He identified Tyree Blige, correct?
Yes.
And even though he wasn't cooperating, he was honest. Even though he didn't want to cooperate, he was honest.
He was, yes.
But it took you 5 different interviews with Javante cooperating, and he still wasn't being fully honest, correct?
That's correct.
Now, I want to talk about the crime scene.
Okay.
Have you had an opportunity to see the crime scene log from Detective Bacon?
Yes, I've seen it.
Okay. Do you want one in front? Do you have one in front of you?
Oh, I'll take one if we have questions on it. Thank you.
Now, on that diagram, can you identify somewhat where the hill was?
Each of them always spoke of a hill. I always assume it was this part right here.
Okay, and that part that you are indicating to the jury, is that where 380 shell casings were?
Let's see. 380s were 3 through 6. So with the exception of this 6th one right here, these were the 380s.
Okay, and that is on a hill.
Correct.
And where 6 is that the bottom of the hill?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm pointing to you 8, 6, 8, 7, 9, 10.
Okay.
That area.
Yes.
Who was parked around that area? At the bottom of the hill?
That would have been Jacala's vehicle that was parked right there, as well as like that orange vehicle. Nick's vehicle was parked maybe 2 spaces besides Jacala. In between those 2 spaces was his vehicle.
Okay, and where I just identified those numbers, those are 45 shell casings, correct?
45 cal, yes.
Okay, and so you determined when you arrested Javante that those 45 shell casings were his.
Objection.
No, I didn't make that
So
decision.
don't answer the question yet. That's okay. What's the objection?
I would draw speculation, but she can answer.
Okay, ask the question again, so we're all following along.
So who did you believe the 45 shell casings
look, I never made a determination of who, with the fact that I didn't have a gun, I didn't go by assuming who was where when I look at this drawing.
Okay. When, I'm gonna hold this drawing.
Sure.
When, this is the hill, correct?
Yes.
The people shooting from the hill shot straight, correct?
Shot in that direction, yes.
And they're 12, 13, and 14. Can you tell me what those identify?
There's a projectile for 12, and then it's defects for 13.
Okay, so that means defects in a car from a gun.
Correct.
From a bullet.
That's correct.
And so did you determine that these shell casings resulted in these defects?
Didn't make that determination.
Okay, you didn't make that determination. But you do agree,
Mhm.
but you do agree that, that in this general area where the 45 shell casings were, that's where Jacayla's car was parked?
Yes, as far as, yes, ma'am.
And you found 5 380 shell casings? Do you need this?
Yeah, please. Yes, 5.
And you found 4 45 shell casings?
Correct.
Now, when you see in the video, you see Solo drop,
Yes,
and you know Solo had a gunshot wound to the leg,
yes.
and you can't determine when he was shot in the back.
I can't determine when he was shot, period.
Okay. Are you aware that the bullet direction, the trajectory of the direction is upward?
I understand that it was a ricochet. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay, so are you aware that the 45 projectile found in the body was not fragments from,
No, I'm not aware.
when you say ricochet, that's because it was fragmented.
Well, I say ricochet because I did know about the angle to answer your question. And looking at the video, it appeared that the shooters were actually shooting towards the ground. So it made sense when I was told that the angle went upwards. So when I say ricochet, just from the gun, the bullet hits the ground and then come up and hit the victim.
So, but there is a car between, so when Solo trips,
Mhm. Yes,
there's a
ma'am.
car blocking him at that point.
He
right?
falls in between 2 vehicles.
And hypothetically, if he was shot in the leg and he's falling, he could have been shot in the back.
Yes.
Now, when you watch that fight, the fist fight, just the fist fight part,
Yes, ma'am.
you don't see Tyree Gang involved, right?
No,
You don't see him being an aggressor in the situation.
no.
When you looked up his criminal history, correct?
Yes,
And he has no criminal history.
that's correct.
And he has the right to own a firearm,
He does.
and he has the right to defend others.
Yes,
Nothing further. Thank you.
no problem.
Mr. King, questions for Investigator Barry?
Yeah, very briefly, Judge. Let's go out the video. Good afternoon.
How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So I just want to ask you a few questions about your observation from the video.
Okay.
You don't need to go through everything that we all went through, but I wanted to draw your attention to when you see, can you just use your screen and circle right now where Mr. Javante Rivers is based on your investigation?
It's a screenshot, but I would say That's Mr. Rivers.
Okay.
Javante.
What happened? Okay, so I'm gonna back this up.
Okay.
So you see Javante kind of huffing and puffing and walking around, right?
Yes.
And then, so you would agree that at this point, based on all the angles that you have observed, you cannot see Javante Rivers because of the obstruction.
Correct.
And actually, in this frame, you can't see Javante Rivers or the deceased Solomon Smith. Is that right?
In this frame, yes, that's correct.
Okay. So immediately after this frame, would you agree that you see Solomon Smith take a couple steps and then kind of dive right there? Would that be correct?
You said dive?
Yeah, kind of like
Yes.
dive and fall.
Yes.
And at this point, you still cannot see Javante Rivers based on your investigation from any angles. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so, and based on your investigation, you can't rule out that Javante Rivers fired a shot prior to him coming into your view. Is that correct?
Fired a shot where? Towards whom?
Towards Solomon Smith.
I can't say that repeat your question?
Based on your investigation and watching all of the different angles of your videos, you cannot rule out Javante Rivers firing his gun at this moment,
At the
right
victim?
here, at the victim.
In my investigation, I would say that he would not, because he's close friends with the victim. So I wouldn't see a reason why he would, in my investigation, shoot at the victim.
Okay, now that's not my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I understand the philosophy, but you can't rule out that he pulled the trigger at this point. Is that right?
I can't see him, so I can't see what he's doing at this time.
Okay. Was there at a certain point in which you actually thought that Javante Rivers was the one who actually caused Solomon Smith's death?
I didn't think so. But the reason he was arrested was because he's shooting in the same direction as the other two shooters, without knowing, because I didn't have the ballistics at the time, whose bullet was responsible. And for sure, Mr. Rivers is shooting, that we could see him shoot. So with felony murder, he did catch the murder charges before, but I never saw a reason why he would shoot this victim. I never saw a reason why he would shoot at anyone actually in this whole scenario.
So what you viewed when it comes to the direction he shot
Correct.
is not in line with your philosophy of Javante Rivers not shooting in that direction, correct?
I got confused with your
I asked a better question. I'm sorry. You said that you assumed that Javante Rivers did not shoot at Solomon Smith in the frame in which you can't see him, right?
Yes, because they're friends.
Because they were friends.
Yes. But
But as we move forward, doesn't he shoot in the same direction of Solomon Smith
he shot
when he becomes in view?
he shot in the same direction as the shooters, which is clearly not at Mr. Smith, because at that time he's down on the ground.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, I mean.
Now, based on your investigation, Mr. Rivers did say that he didn't know where Solomon Smith was, correct?
Yes, he didn't know after he was shot.
Well, he didn't know he was shot, right?
Right. So after he was shot, yeah, I do recall him saying that he didn't know where he was at that time.
Okay. Did he ever say that he knew specifically where Solomon Smith was when the shots were fired?
No, he never said.
Okay. So we're not sure if he actually knew where Solomon Smith was at any point during the melee. Is that
Correct.
right?
That's right.
Okay. So we can't be sure that he wouldn't shoot in the direction of Solomon Smith because they were friends, because he never testified that he knew he was there. Wouldn't that be correct?
Yeah, we can't be sure.
Just a few more questions. So based on your investigation, you can confirm that that night, that 4 people fired a gun, correct?
I can confirm of 3 based on my investigation.
Okay. Well, you can confirm 3, but based on your investigation, if you count all of the people who told you that there were shooters, there were at least 5. Would that be right?
4.
You-
The 5th.
You have the 2 shooters that were walking down the hill, right?
Yes, sir.
You have Javante Rivers.
Yes.
You have the young lady that shot out the back door of the car.
Okay.
That would be 4. And didn't Javante and Jakayla both say that there was a person with dreads, with long dreads, that were shooting?
They did make that statement.
Okay. And obviously that's not what you can confirm, right?
That's correct.
That's all I have. Thank you, Judge.
Mr. Abate, redirect for Investigator Barry.
Yes. Now, Investigator Detective Barry. So if Javante Smith, Solomon Smith is shot on the left side of his back,
Yes.
right here. And this is the orange car right here. Here's Jakayla's car. And here's the back area where Javante is not able to be seen in the video.
Okay.
And Solomon Smith is running this way. How does Javante Smith shoot him from over here?
I can't explain it.
If Javante Smith was shooting from this side, would he have an entrance wound on the right side of the back?
If he was shooting on the, well, just going by your scenario, point again to where the victim,
The victim is shot in the left side of his back.
okay,
The victim is running. Javante is back and to his right.
it should be to the right side then if he was hitting at that time when he was diving.
And
the
who was
victim.
in front of the victim, Solomon Smith, when he was shot?
I just recall the car. I don't know if there was a person right by him.
Yes, but who was shooting in front of?
That was, I can't remember. It was head in Mr. Blige at the time.
And you aware that Solomon Smith was shot in his front of his right, or left leg?
I know the bottom part of the leg. I can't recall left or right.
Okay, and are you aware that the trajectory is front to back?
Yes.
Okay. Is Javante behind Solomon Smith when he shot in the video, or is he in front of him?
He's not in front. He's behind.
Okay. Now, do you remember, let's back up, Miss Megan asked you a little bit about William Lewis's interview.
Yes.
And do you recall talking with William Lewis about Helen having a gun, or a female having a gun?
Yes.
And when you spoke with William Lewis, did he indicate that he never even knew that there was a gun being pointed at him?
Correct. He stated he was told.
Would you agree that at the time that the barrage of shots are going off, that the entire fight had been broken up, that everyone was dispersing.
Yes,
And would you agree from watching the video that the defendants casually walk up to where Solomon Smith and the rest of the people in the parking lot?
yes,
Do they run?
no,
In watching the video, from the time that Mr. Blige exits the Buckhead lot, is he hiding behind his vehicle?
no,
Is he very visible to the rest of the people that are down by the parking lot?
yes,
Well, let's back up. So would you agree that Mr. Blige parks towards the top of the incline? I don't know if I called it a hill.
that's where he first parked, yes.
So is that before or after the shooting?
I was both. He parked there before the shooting and then moved his vehicle, parked in the same parking spot after the shooting.
Okay, so before the shooting, he's parked top of the incline.
Yes,
And before the shooting, does Mr. Blige, is he ever down in the midst of where the fighting occurred?
the physical altercation, no,
And is he a pretty good distance or based on your walking of the crime scene from where two shooters came up and began shooting?
he was a good distance.
You'd agree it was dark,
Yes,
and would you agree that Javonta and other members that were fighting that were not part of the defendant's friends were unaware that Mr. Blige was up there?
Speculation.
I'll rephrase the question.
Okay.
At any point before the fight, at any point before when Ellen is punched, when Rhea is punched, when Solomon and William Lewis get into an argument in this fight, is Mr. Blige anywhere near that fight?
no,
When all of that is occurring, is Mr. Head always in his vehicle?
yes,
And when you see Mr. Head get out of his vehicle and walk down with Mr. Blige, is anything going on?
nothing happened at that time.
Is any guns being pointed at anyone in that group?
I can't see a gun being pointed at anyone in the group.
Based on your training experience and number of years with the Atlanta Police Department, if Javonta Rivers would have shot back towards the back end of the parking lot,
Okay,
would you expect to find a shell casing in that area?
yes, I would.
Did you find a shell casing in that area?
I did not.
And if Javonta Rivers was to shoot in the direction from the back of the parking lot, would you expect to find defects in vehicles?
Yes, we expect defects.
Did you find any defects in any vehicles that were diagonal towards, if you're looking towards Buckhead Law? So if you're looking at,
They were, I cannot point at the vehicles that had defects.
Judge, I'm only gonna use this for one question, so I'm not gonna pull it up.
Okay.
Okay. These vehicles that were right here had.
So were there any vehicles around Jaquela Rivers' car that had any defects?
No,
The Jaquela Rivers vehicle had any defects?
they did not.
After all the shooting ended, is Mr. Blige crouched behind his vehicle and then fires 2 additional shots in the direction of Javonta Rivers, Jaquela Rivers, Rhea Thompson, everyone who's on scene?
Yes,
After the shooting, after Mr. Blige shot 2 more shots, do you see Javonta Rivers ever go pick up shell casings?
no,
Do you see Javonta Rivers tamper with the scene at all?
no,
Are the only people you see tampering with the scene and picking up shell casings Mr. Blige and Mr. Quentin Williams.
Correct.
Did anyone from Solomon Smith's crew, do you see any of them picking up shell cases?
No, sir.
Do you see any of them tampering with the physical crime scene?
No.
And in the video, do you see Rhea Thompson fire a gun at all?
I don't.
Did you make every effort to recover that firearm?
I did.
Did you not recover the firearm because Rhea Thompson was uncooperative,
That's correct.
but she didn't shoot?
I didn't see her shoot.
Did any witness on scene tell you she shot?
No one said that she shot. I've heard a testimony of a female shooting, but no one said that Miss Thompson shot.
Okay. And on that video, all the surveillance that you recovered, you can track Miss Thompson as well.
Yes,
And on the video surveillance, do you ever see Miss Thompson fire a gun?
I did not.
And in your investigation, Detective Barry, did you ever recover any firearms from Xavier Head?
I collected no firearms in this case.
And did you ever collect any firearms from Tyree Black?
No.
No further questions, Judge.
Ms. Fagan?
Detective Barry, I want to use this picture behind you.
Okay.
Okay, where did you just say that you saw defects? Okay, and where in Detective Bacon's crime scene do you see those defects?
I don't think he had any.
Okay, where did he put some?
Over the defects on 1213, which is this right here.
Okay,
These are
and
theirs.
would you agree that that's located around here?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, now, and that was the direction Javante Rivers was shooting?
I couldn't see him shooting in that direction.
Okay. So. Ultimately, though, Detective Bacon didn't put any projectiles in the back of the parking lot, correct?
Not on his drawing, no.
And that would be important information, correct?
I would say so. Crime scene should have taken photos of that, those vehicles though, those defects.
But the defects that he did identify were closer to Buckhead Loft,
Yes,
okay? And not in the direction looking down the hill, right?
that's correct.
It's down the hill and to the left.
According to his drawing, yeah, that's exactly what he has.
I want to do one more hypothetical.
Okay,
The hill, I'm looking up the hill,
towards
Yeah.
Peachtree?
okay? And, Jacayla's car.
Okay.
Okay? And I'm gonna be Solomon. Now, Solomon initially got into it with William Lewis on Asia's car, and Asia gets Will in the car and they drive off.
Right.
Right? And Solo, once gunshots are fired, he starts running, right?
Yes,
And he gets hit in his left leg, right?
yes,
In the front.
yes, yes,
And then you see him fall, right?
yes.
For Tyree Blige to defend William Lewis did not have to see that gun behind his head, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
William Lewis told you he didn't see the gun behind his head, correct?
Yes,
But he told you that Tyree told him that he saw it, correct?
yes.
Thank you.
Mr. King?
No question.
No other questions. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, any questions for Detective Barry? You got a few? Sarge, if you could collect those, please. Thank you. All right, counsel, join me, please.
It's Friday. Y'all got a good weekend. That's all it is.
Investigator, you mentioned that at one point, Mr. Rivers, in one of his interviews, I don't remember which one, he said something to the effect of, it wasn't his fault. Did he explain to you what it was that he was saying he wasn't responsible for?
So that would be the very first interview that I heard him say that upon my arrival at the hospital. And I asked him right then and there what was in reference to that line, and he couldn't give me a response. At that time, he was being very emotional and crying. I couldn't get a direct response, besides the fact that he was defending girls who was getting jumped by a guy.
Do you recall from which female Mr. Rivers obtained the gun? We watched a little footage and see the gun moving around.
Right.
Do you recall from which female it was that Mr. Rivers got the gun?
From the video footage, when the female that was standing by the car, I always assumed that was Rhea who had it. And he took the gun from her, which was the first time I saw that particular gun.
You were shown some video footage of people picking things up from the parking lot when you were talking with Mr. Abate about picking up shell casings or something like that. How do you know specifically what those people were picking up?
I can't confirm, but the only thing that would be out there in the middle of a parking lot after shooting, and I know that these group of people were in the club together, they collect evidence. They collect the shell casings to try to throw off the investigation of what they
But that's just so I'm clear, that's your theory as opposed to there's footage we didn't see or there's other information.
I got that information just from the footage that we all saw.
Okay. So it could have been $20 bills.
It could have been yes.
Okay. Did you at some point say that Mr. Lewis shared with you that he was going to turn himself in?
He was talking about Mr. Blige.
Mr. Blige was going to turn himself in.
Yes.
And did Mr. Lewis tell you for what Mr. Blige was going to turn himself in?
He did not tell me why.
At some point during your interview with Mr. Lewis, when Judge Teskey was there, did Judge Teskey offer Mr. Lewis something to encourage him to keep talking to you all?
No, sir.
Why did you choose not to pursue charges, if they'd be appropriate, against Rhea, I think is the right name, for obstruction or whatnot, for not helping you track down that gun that you saw passed around?
Well, honestly, with that part of the investigation, I always assumed that the DA's office would probably start an investigation on that and do the obstruction that way, rather than me put out that charge on her. I would honestly just focus on the homicide investigation part of the case And usually it's not unusual for the DA's office to pick up additional charges for people that I have put charges on and other parties of the case.
That's something you've experienced in the past in other investigations you've had.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. Mr. Abate, any follow-up with Investigator Barry in connection with these topics? Ms. Fagan?
Just to confirm, when you were saying that Mr. Black is gonna turn himself in, you hadn't gotten any warrants out for him?
No, I had not.
Mr. King?
No questions.
Investigator Barry, thank you so much for your time. You are free to go. Mr. Abate, next witness.
Then call, Shakita Harrison. Ms. Harrison.
You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so that we can you state your name and spell it for the record?
Shakita Harrison, CHIQUITAHARRISON.
Good afternoon, Ms. Harrison. Thank you for joining us. I need you to do two things for me if you're comfortable with one of them. One would be to take your mask off while you're testifying, because it's a lot easier to hear the witnesses. If you're not comfortable with that, you can leave it on, but you definitely need to move closer to the mic either way, so that the chair's pretty heavy and does not have wheels. So if you need help moving it, we can get a deputy to help you move it. But we need you closer to the microphone, please.
Good afternoon, Ms. Harrison. Do you have any children?
Yes,
How many children do you have?
8.
Can we pull that microphone up just a little bit so Ms. Rivers can hear you?
8.
And do you see one of your kids sitting at one of these tables?
Yes,
And what's his name?
Xavier Head.
Okay. And does your son have a child with Miss Asia Drain?
Yes,
And back in July of 2019, was your son living with Miss Drain in Clayton County?
yes,
And was Mr. Head arrested on August 16th of 2019?
I have no idea what the date was.
Okay. Ms. Harrison, what'd you do with the gun?
What gun?
I can't hear you.
What gun?
The one that you took from your son and Miss Drain's house on August 17th of 2019, the day after he was arrested.
I never took a gun from my son.
I need you to talk more into the microphone, please.
I never took a gun from my son.
Is it your testimony that after your son was arrested, you didn't go to his house the next day?
I have no idea, sir.
Ma'am, you need to, the microphone bends if you want to move it closer to your mouth, but we need you to speak up, please.
So is it your testimony you didn't go to his house soon after he was arrested?
I'm sorry, I can't remember. I have no idea.
You can't remember?
No, I can't.
Okay. I don't have any further questions, Judge.
Ms. Fagan, any questions for Ms. Harrison?
No questions.
Mr. King?
No question.
Jurors? Ms. Harrison, you may leave. Next witness.
Thank you, call, Ms. Asia Gray.
Asia Drain, AYSHIADRANE.
Say,
Ms. Drain, good afternoon. Appreciate you being here. If you're comfortable with it, if you could take your mask off, it will make it easier for folks to hear you. And then you're going to want to be kind of near the microphone, but with the mask off, it should be easier. Thank you.
say, good afternoon, Ms. Drain.
Hi.
Can you tell the jurors how old you are?
26.
And do you have any children?
I have 2.
And what do you do for a living?
I am a self-employed business owner. I own like a hair boutique.
Okay.
The self-employed, something at a hair boutique. I didn't hear the middle word.
I own it's a hair boutique. I own it.
Okay.
And do you know Mr. Xavier Head?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know him?
He's the father of one of my children.
Okay. And were you in a relationship with him?
I was
And how long were you with him?
maybe like 2.5 months, like a year and a half, 2 years almost.
Okay. And how old is your child?
She's 2.
Okay. And when was she born?
March 22nd, 2019.
Okay. And back in July of 2019, where were you living?
In Flint River Crossing Apartments.
Okay. Is that in Clayton County? And how long had you been living there?
We moved into a new unit like that month in July, but we've been there for a year.
Okay. And who did you live there with?
Myself. It was my apartment. I mean, I lived there with Xavier, but it was my apartment.
Okay. The apartment was in your name,
Yes.
but you let Xavier stay there?
Mhm.
Okay. You got to say yes or no for the record. Okay.
Yes.
And do you see Xavier here in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
And Your Honor, if everyone can lower their masks.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please remove your masks. Everyone in court, remove your mask or please leave court if you're not going to, and we'll see if an identification can be made. If you're not taking your mask off, I need you to step outside. Thank you.
And Ms. Drain, if you would identify him by an article of clothing that he's wearing and the person sitting next to him, what he or
A
she
blue
is
shirt
wearing.
with a red tie.
Okay. And is he sitting next to a man or a woman? Okay. Your Honor, let the record reflect that the witness has identified Defendant Xavier Head.
She has. Thank you.
And
Masks back on.
Ms. Drain, how long had you lived with Xavier Head?
How long did he live with me? He
Yes.
lived with me the whole time I was in that apartment.
Okay. And back on July 11th of 2019, did he go out to celebrate Will Lewis's birthday?
He did.
And do you know Will Lewis?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. Did you know where they were going to celebrate?
I didn't know prior, like before they went, no, I just knew they were going out.
Okay. And do you remember about what time he left?
No, I was dealing with our baby, so I really don't know.
Do you remember what time you got home that night?
After like 3 or 4, it was late.
Okay,
Or late.
so the next morning on July 12th?
Yes.
And what kind of car was he driving?
It was a small silver compact car. I'm not sure like the exact make and model, but it was a silver compact car, 4-door.
4-door? And was it his car or was it somebody else's?
It was his mother's car. She obtained it through Uber.
Okay. And so was she allowing him to drive it?
Yes, she was.
And that evening and into the next morning, did you attempt to call Xavier?
I don't remember. I may have to be like, where you at? But I don't remember.
Okay. Now, did Xavier have a gun?
Yes.
What kind?
It was a 380.
A 380?
Yes.
Okay. And when, if you want, you can move the mic down so it's closer to your mouth. Where did he keep, when he got back on July 12th, do you know where he put the 380?
I'm not sure where it went, like in movement, if he did move it, but it was up most of the time in our closet or in the laundry room above the washing machine and dryer.
Okay. And after July 12th, did you see Xavier on the news?
I did not until his other child's mom said something. She called and let us know.
Okay.
After that, I saw it. I looked it up myself.
And when you say she let us know, were you with Xavier when he found out that his picture was on the news?
Yes, I was in the car with him. We were on the way somewhere.
Okay. And after that, did he tell you anything about what happened that night?
I mean, not in detail, but he did try to brush it off. Like, you know, me and my boys, we just went out and got rowdy pretty much, which is what they typically do.
Okay. And did you know who he was going out with that night?
Yeah, I knew he was going out with Will. I knew Will for sure because it was his birthday. But I mean, I assumed Tresson was going to be there. That's one of his friends. But I mean, that's just his friends. Anyone else, I don't really know.
What kind of car did Tresson drive?
It is a white 4-door car with like a black roof. I think it's 4-door. It might be 2-door, but it's a white car with like a black roof.
And what does Tresson, can you describe for the jury his hairstyle?
It is very interesting. It's like an afro with like some dreadlocks hanging out of it.
What did you tell me it was called earlier today?
A bird's nest.
Okay.
Is that a technical term?
No, it just looks like a bird's nest.
Okay.
Now, on August 16th of 2019, was Xavier arrested?
Say that again. Repeat the question.
On August 16th of 2019, was Xavier arrested?
Yes.
And where was he arrested?
From my home.
Can you describe to the jurors how that went down?
So we were laying in the bed. Xavier looked over to me and said, like, the police are here. They're outside. Get up. And I got up and put my clothes on and went downstairs and opened the door. And they like grabbed me and asked me where he was, asked me if Xavier was in the home. And I let him know that he was. He asked me if anyone else was in the home. And I said, yes, it's my daughter. So please don't shoot because my daughter's in there. And he informed me that he wouldn't as long as he cooperated. Xavier came downstairs and he yanked him up and put him in the car.
Okay. And at the time of his arrest, had this experience or phone call where Xavier and you were in the car found out that his picture was on the news, inquiring about who he was. Did that happen before his arrest?
The baby mama calling about the picture?
Yes.
That happened before, yes.
Okay. How long before the arrest?
It was a while because I think it happened in July. He got arrested in August. And this was maybe like a week or so after when she called.
Okay.
So relatively soon.
Now, after his arrest, was the gun still in your house?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was.
And it's the same 380 that you were referring to a
Yes.
couple minutes ago.
Yes.
What happened to that gun?
I had given it to his mother. His mom and his dad were in like a little debate about who should get it. Tresson came to my home because he was like the proctor for the dad or in the stand-in because they can't get along. So ultimately it went with Miss Chiquita because the dad was not there and Tristan is not the dad. So yeah.
And had you and Mr. Tresson had conversations that about this gun?
Not really, just other than
Stop.
I'm not asking what the content of that conversation is. I'm just asking if they had.
Discussed it?
Yes.
Okay.
not really,
Overruled.
not in detail. I knew he was coming over because I had spoken to his dad about coming to get it, but he wasn't coming because of Chiquita. She already was gonna come anyway because she wanted to see Zuri. So she was already gonna be there.
Who's Zuri?
My daughter. That's Xavier's daughter too.
And so after she'd come to see Zuri, she ultimately took the gun.
Yes.
And do you know what she did with that gun?
No, I don't remember if she put it inside of a bag or anything. I don't remember her walking out the door with it just in her hand, but once she left my apartment, I have no idea.
Okay. And after Xavier got arrested, did he ever call you from the jail?
Yeah.
And were there any discussions about this gun?
Overruled. Just don't get into the substance without flagging what the substance, what your question's going to be.
I just want to know if y'all discussed the gun, not what you discussed, just that there was discussions about the gun.
I believe so. Like after his mom got it, I believe I let him know like it's not in my house anymore. Your mama got it, but
Was there an occasion or a time that Tress and Holly was at your house and you handed him the phone to talk to Xavier?
yes, the same day that Miss Chiquita got the gun was the same day that he called while Tristan happened to be there in the middle of this conversation.
So the same day that Tresson,
The same day Miss Chiquita got the gun is the same day that Xavier called and Tristan happened to be there in this conversation, like in this day,
conversation concerning the gun.
the gun and who it would go with.
Has after Miss Harrison, Mr. Head's mom took that gun, has she ever discussed anything or where it is?
I don't care for her that much. I don't talk to that lady about shit.
Are you and Mr. Head in a good place?
Hell no.
Okay. And why not?
He's a horrible person. He's a despicable man, the scum of the fucking earth. That's why.
And are you testifying today because of that?
That he's a scum of the earth?
Yes.
No, I'm testifying because I need this closure. I need this chapter of my life to be over with. Me and my daughter deserve so much more.
And are you making up anything about this gun because you're mad at him or you think he's a scum of the earth?
I have no reason to make up anything out of anger because I'm not coming from a place of anger when it comes to that situation. So no.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Ms. Fagan, do you have any questions for Ms. Drain?
I just have one question. You don't know Tyree Black,
Nope.
correct?
Not at all.
Hello, Mr. King.
One second, Jesse. Good afternoon.
Hi.
I obviously heard some of the things that you just said about Xavier Head. When you all were in a good place, did y'all go out at certain times together?
Yeah, we would.
Okay. And just in the way that he acted when you all went out, was he ever aggressive toward other people?
Not really. I mean, not when we were like out, just me and him, it'd just be us. So I mean, there was no need for him to be aggressive toward anybody while we were on a date or something. So no.
Okay. So just want to make sure you didn't, Xavier didn't direct you to do anything with this firearm, correct?
I mean, in terms of giving it to his mom and his dad, I do think we had that conversation as to, like, I let him know that I didn't want that shit in my house. I didn't want anything to do with him, that gun, or this situation. So that's what the conversation in terms of that, like, yeah, you need to get your mama or your daddy to come and get this out of my house.
Thank you.
Mr. Abate, any follow-up with Ms. Drain?
Very briefly, Miss Graham, when you and Mr. Hebb were in a good place, did you buy him clothes?
Yes.
And did you ever buy him a pair of black Adidas pants with 3 stripes down the side?
I believe so.
And did you see him then when he left that night on July 11th to go to Will Lewis's birthday?
Yes.
And did you see the photograph that was released on the media with your then boyfriend's picture?
Yes.
And in that picture, was he wearing the black Adidas pants with the 3 stripes?
Yes, as well as a black t-shirt.
Black t-shirt?
Yes.
Nothing else, Judge.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. King?
No.
Okay. Nope. Any questions from the jurors? All right. Ms. Drain, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, sir.
You are free to go. We're going to take a 5-minute break. This is not the afternoon break, but we're going to take about a 5-minute break. If you go to the jury room, please, don't discuss the case, do any outside research. Mr. Abate, you've got your next witness ready to go? Okay, great. Thank you.
You ready? Yeah, this is where I'm at. No. Not yet. Hey, I was mostly glad to hear the conversation you guys are having. So if I can be another year.
All right, sorry, we're back. This drug court graduation, I had to get down there and say congratulations to my drug court graduates. I've done that.
You left for that?
I did leave for that. I did you guys were there, but I gave my little speech. It's all good. It is hard. It's, you start with this many and you get down to this many. And so these are the folks who, they've done great. 18 months clean time, et cetera. So all the other judges were there. I gave my little speech. So if we can get Mr. King, we'll get the defendants out. Who's the next witness?
Investigator, real short. And then
He's kind of tall. Okay. And then Grant Rude, that's going to be the calls.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that'll be, I guess, when we think another break.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, listen to.
He's getting the defendants. Great.
So Whitney coming off? Can't imagine that gonna be long.
No, it's not. He said it's
Yes, please. Thank you.
Or else for the jurors.
Thank you, Sergeant. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Abate, your next witness.
Investigator Joseph Smith. Joseph Rickman, sorry.
I do so swear. Joseph Rickman, JOSEPHRICKMAN.
Investigator Rickman, good afternoon. Are you okay taking your mask off?
Yes, sir.
Great.
Good afternoon, Investigator Rickman.
Good afternoon, sir.
Can you tell the jurors where you are currently employed?
I'm a senior investigator in the Major Case Division of the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, more or less the homicide unit here in Fulton County.
And how long have you been with the DA's office?
3 months.
And prior to working in the district attorney's office, can you tell the jurors where you worked?
I've worked a variety of places. I've been 31 years in the criminal justice system, a little bit of everything. Uniform patrol with the Newton County Sheriff's Department in Covington. I was with the DA's office at the Alcovey Judicial Circuit, which covers Baltimore and Newton County. Worked with the State Department of Corrections, starting out 4 years with the county attorney's office. And then prior to coming here, I was the chief investigator with the public defender's office here in Fulton County.
Were you assigned to work on the case that involved defendants Xavier Head and Tyree Blash?
Yes, sir, I was.
And as part of your job responsibilities and duties with as an investigator with the DA's office, to locate witnesses
Yes, sir.
and to serve subpoenas.
Yes, sir.
And can you tell the jury why subpoenas are served?
Subpoenas are served to compel witnesses in any type of case, but specifically in this case, a homicide, to attend court at the time directed and provide testimony in the criminal matter.
And when you say compel, have there been times in your career here at the DA's office, as well as your extensive career in law enforcement, that people don't want to come to court?
Yes, sir, most every day.
To include our jurors?
Now, as part of your responsibilities with this case, were you assigned to locate and subpoena Ray Thompson?
Yes, sir, I was.
And did you look in all the addresses in which that were listed, or through your investigation that you found here in Georgia?
Yes, sir. We have access to databases that cover utilities, credit applications, things of that nature. In regards to Ms. Thompson, I did a physical, thorough, and diligent search of every address located here in Georgia. During that process, I also spoke with, obviously tried to reach her by phone. In regards to Ms. Thompson, I then began contacting her family, her brothers, her sisters, her father, her mother. Through the course of those conversations and also through some of the database history, it became evident that Ms. Thompson was residing in the South Florida area, specifically Miramar, and also several other addresses down around Miami.
And as part of your investigative efforts, did you have the fugitive team in Broward attempt to locate her?
That's correct. I did work with the Broward County. Down there, it's called the State Attorney's Office. Their investigators were very responsive. They went out to some of the addresses due to some of the time constraints as far as and jurisdictional problems with us flying back and forth. Also, at one point in time, I did actually text briefly with Ms. Thompson, and then also had her sister attempt to speak with her. And then it had been conveyed to me that she was in South Florida and she was evading attending court.
Did you also call her Other than texting, did you also call her phone several times?
Hundreds.
Are you now blocked because of those
I
hundreds
am
of calls?
blocked, definitely blocked.
Okay.
Any number I have.
During that process, did we also, first, can you explain what's an interstate compact subpoena?
An interstate compact subpoena essentially is a Georgia subpoena, or a Florida subpoena is not valid in Georgia, and vice versa. So what we do through interstate compact is we work through other jurisdictions. We coordinate with their DA's offices down there. It's kind of a civil process where the witness has a right to a hearing and go in front of a judge if they don't waive and decide to come up here voluntarily. But again, it is a process of filing the paperwork, and they have some rights, if they don't waive. And that's a process that we initiated in this instance.
And in your experience over the many number of years that you've been an investigator here in Georgia, is that a pretty quick process?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It just depends. In this situation, especially with COVID, since it is civil jurisdictions and judges aren't having court in Florida, and as well in some instances up here, it can be a delayed process. We have found that it to be extremely difficult to get that subpoena converted.
I'm sorry, I should have asked a better question. In your experience where the district attorney's office here in Fulton County is assisting with an interstate compact subpoena for other jurisdictions in other states, is it always a pretty quick process?
Yes, sir. For the most part, yes, sir.
A judge is always available?
For the most part, yes, sir.
Is that the case in Broward County?
Oh, no, sir. It wasn't the case in Broward County.
Did we serve them with the paperwork that was signed by Judge McBurney over 4 weeks ago?
That's correct. We did have the paperwork for the subpoena completed, signed by Judge McBurney, and we issued it to the, I believe down there, they call it extradition unit.
Bless you.
Bless you. And yes, ma'am. Thank you. And ultimately, as we sit here today, has a court date been assigned where Miss Thompson could be possibly subpoenaed?
No, sir.
Okay. And despite that, have you continued your efforts up until yesterday to get her up here from Florida?
Even today, we've had various friends and family members, and of course, could I have made contact with her even as early as today? For as long as this trial goes, we would have flown her same day, whatever it took to get her here to this trial.
And during this process, did you speak to Ms. Thompson's mother?
Correct.
And did you attempt to determine if she had a firearm, her mother?
Yes.
No further questions.
Ms. Fagan, any questions for Investigator Rickman?
Yes, thank you. You're trying to have Ms. Thompson here because you're aware that Ms. Thompson gave Javante Rivers that gun?
No,
Hold on one second.
Off of speculation, he wasn't there.
Okay. You may ask it differently? I think you can explore this. I'm all right with that, but ask it differently.
Okay, you are, what was your position here?
I'm a senior investigator.
Okay, so you're the senior investigator.
Well, I'm not the senior investigator, but I'm a
You're the senior investigator
Yeah.
on this case.
correct. Either which way, yeah.
Have you had an opportunity to go through the case?
I'm going to withdraw my objection. We can go straight to that.
I have.
Okay.
Okay, and in this case, have you watched the video?
Yes, ma'am.
And in the video, do you see Rhea Thompson give the gun to Javante Rivers?
Yes, ma'am.
And ultimately, you were not able to determine where that gun was from Rhea Thompson.
Correct.
And you were not able to determine what type of.
Correct.
Mr. King, any questions?
I have no questions.
Any questions from the jurors? None. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Abate, next witness.
The Grant Root.
Do you have another witness that you could do now, or your flow is such that Grant Rude is the better witness? Better is the wrong word, but the preferable witness for the flow you're pursuing.
We can replace gutter with last,
Pardon me?
so we can replace gutter with last witness.
Better was the word I used. Okay, yeah. Oh, last witness, final witness. Okay. Based on what I understand he's going to be talking about, I think we need to have a discussion outside the presence of the jury. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, even though you just had a short break, you're going to get your afternoon break because there are some things I need to cover with the lawyers before Mr. Rude can testify. So if you'll please go with Sarge, you've got your jury room, you've got your hallway, and we'll get you back as soon as we can. Hmm? Yeah, but the defendants need to stay until what we want to be. We're not going anywhere. They are.
I'm sorry, I heard gutter. I apologize.
Gutter, yeah, no, better. And I just, anyway. So does Mr. Melnick need to stick around?
No, go.
What about Monday?
No.
Okay. I was gonna say, I'm supposed to be on trial on Monday in County. I was gonna tell you that if I was here, I would.
We'll pull you out of there. All right. We are going to talk about the jail calls now. And I like to do that up front. If the lawyers or either of their clients need an afternoon break, we'll do that. But let's get, unless it has to happen right now, let's get seated and talk a little bit about the jail calls. And then I promise you can have a very, very, very short break after that. But we're going to use most of the jurors' break to work through the jail calls. All right. As long as you're good to keep going, Ms. Rivers. Okay. Okay. So I got an email at 1:20 a.m. It would be this morning from Mr. Abate. It went to Ms. Fagan and Mr. King. It had 7 calls attached to it. I trust Ms. Fagan, you already had those 7 calls. Not news to you?
I don't know. I didn't receive the email.
Pardon me?
I didn't receive the email.
Oh, okay. Mr. Abate, I assume these aren't calls that, I'm pretty sure they're not calls you just got. They would have been produced in discovery long ago.
Yes, Judge.
Okay. I don't know why you guys didn't get it. We're on the same distribution list I was, but we don't need to go there right now because we've got the calls. I want to lay the framework as to how I believe I am to assess, and you are free to argue, the admissibility of any statements on the calls that don't come from Mr. Head's mouth. And so we're clear, 7 calls, all involving Mr. Head, no Mr. Blige jail calls. Is that correct, Mr. Abate? So I believe anything Mr. Head is saying, as long as it's relevant, has to be relevant, would be admissible as the admission of a party/party opponent. Mr. King, do you agree with that part, that what your client is saying, that comes in?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the framework that was announced in a physical precedent only Court of Appeals opinion of Johnson versus State at 347 Georgia Appeals 831, but which has been adopted and applied subsequently. And so it's the framework I need to apply, is that the whole conversation has to be reviewed to figure out if the statements of the non-parties are hearsay or they are otherwise admissible. And they are not simply admissible because they're part of the conversation. There is an exception that allows statements to come in because, for example, they show the effect on the person to whom it was made, as opposed to the truth of the matter asserted. Or if there are questions being asked, questions aren't hearsay. There is the right of the party that is proffering the statement of the party opponent to have some context given. The 11th Circuit case that influences all the subsequent Georgia cases is United States versus Rivera. It's 780 F3rd 1084. And in that case, Rivera argued the only thing that comes in these tape calls are the things I said. And the 11th Circuit kind of laughed at that assertion because that would mean that you would have these choppy series of statements that are floating there in the ether with no context at all. But Rivera makes the point, Johnson echoes it, and then more recently, the case of Bully versus State, 357 Georgia Appeals 663 from last year, that the court still has to assess what the non-party is saying. If the non-party is saying something that the state is seeking the jurors to consider for the truth of the matter asserted, then that's hearsay. And the fact that it happens to be something to which, in this case, Mr. Head is responding, doesn't make it non-hearsay. There may be something else, a prior inconsistent statement of that declarant, something like that. But there's just not this blanket sense that, well, Mr. Head is in the conversation, so everything comes in. Given that, I listened to, I think, all of the calls, most of them, and I think there are parts that may come in, but there are parts where what it seems to me is that the state wants to get in the truth of what it's mostly Ms. Drain. There's a little bit of Mr. Hawley on one of the calls, but it's mostly Ms. Drain. It may be the truth of what she's asserting. So I need you to narrate for me, Mr. Abate, what from each of the 7 calls you want to get in, and maybe you play those segments. I will tell you, playing them on my computer, the audio for Ms. Drain came through one speaker. She is loud. She's angry. The audio for Mr. Head comes through the other speaker. He is very quiet. He tries to disappear every time the gun is mentioned. He goes real quiet, hangs up the phone. So he's hard to hear, which makes the notion of the state, need to play what Ms. Drain says to give Mr. Head's statement context harder because you don't hear Mr. Head. Sometimes you can hear him just fine, but sometimes they're just talking about how they're not really loving each other right now. And I don't know that was particularly relevant. So why don't you walk us through the 7? It may be based on Ms. Drain's testimony. You don't need all 7. And Ms. what was her name? Ms. Harrison, her 30 seconds on the stand. You may not need them, but I'm not telling you what you need or don't need. Just being mindful of the framework that I've shared with you as I understand the current state of Georgia law. Why don't you tell me which calls you're going to use and either play that segment or narrate it a little bit.
As to the first call, Your Honor, the state would start at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. This is the reported jail phone call where Ms. Drain says, I'm going to give the gun to whoever I need to give it to.
Yep.
We hear the defendant say, do, and then that'd be as far as I go on that call.
Okay. And is there any objection to that segment from call 1, Mr. King?
Yes, Judge. Same objection.
Okay.
I don't see, is it okay if I sit? Or
Please, no. Be comfortable and audible. That's all I need you to do.
Judge, that's a couple of objections. Number 1, this is the hearsay we're talking about. We know what the state's trying to do with it. There's no other reason besides the truth of the matter and then they already got the conversation about the gun. So through the proper witnesses, I don't see a hearsay exception at all.
What's the truth of the matter asserted that the state's going to rely on in the trial? That
they did this on behalf of of Mr. Head.
Ms. Drain says, as I understand it, and I listened to it, I think this is the correct transcription. She says, I'm going to give the gun to whoever I need to give it to. how is the truth of that statement material here as opposed to Mr. Head's reaction, which is you need to not talk about the gun on this recorded call?
Well, see, that's the thing is the reaction, the reaction, they're going to try to make it seem as if it's incriminating.
They are. But as I understand it, this statement of Ms. Drains, which doesn't need to be true, maybe she wasn't going to give the gun to whomever, maybe she was going to keep it, maybe she already sold it, maybe Ms. Harrison had already taken it. She says, I'm going to give the gun to whoever I need to. It's the effect of the statement on the person to whom it was made. This is what Mr. Abate said long ago when we first started broaching your concern. So this seems like a classic example of that. You can disagree with that, but I'm wondering if you've got a different angle than what you and I just talked about.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I think I understand the point. I don't agree that it is a good exception in this situation because they're trying to take the next step that his statement, well, it's just the same argument. The second one is, to me, it's not probative compared to the prejudicial value in this situation. When you do that balance as well, I believe it should not come in because we know the leaps that they're making, and even due to the testimony that's already been here, been given here, the only thing that they can show is that this woman initiated the gun being taken from her home, but they're trying to change the narrative by using something out of context. And so, and based on that, what they're trying to do is more prejudicial than the slight probative value, even if you think it's probative. But the probative value, I don't think it is at all. Because the probative value is because this is the gun that was used in the shooting. The problem is that we don't know.
Okay.
And so for those two reasons, I believe that should be out.
Ms. Fagan, I'm happy to hear from you on any of these. Do you want to be heard on any of this or not your client, not your calls? Okay, I agree. I'm going to allow that segment of call number one. That's the only segment Mr. Abate mentioned. I think that's the end of the call anyway, but that segment I believe is admissible for that point I made, that it is offered to show its effect on the person to whom it was made, which is one of the permissible bases. And in that, I rely on McClure, MCCLURE versus State, which came out 16 days ago. It is A21A0942, a Court of Appeals case, but it actually cites an older case, a Supreme Court case of Gates at 298 Georgia 326, Gates versus State. So one, you may play. Two, tell me what part you want to play, please.
That would begin at 5 minutes and 59 seconds into the recorded phone call, where the defendant said, do I need to just tell Trey to get my shit? Your mama's on her way right now to get the gun.
Well, so we're clear. You're saying Mr. Head, and it's what I hear. Mr. Head says the part about telling Trey. Ms. Drain then says the thing about the gun.
Yes.
Okay.
And following that, I would stop there and then go to 12 minutes and 34 seconds.
Well, so let's pull apart this first one. What is the non-hearsay reason for putting in Ms. Drain saying your mama is on her way right now to get that gun? If you're not playing anything after it, she's the one who's reacting to something Mr. Head said.
Yes. That's correct, and I would, in response, I would say under 24-801 D2B, adopted admissions, where the defendant doesn't say anything, disputing the fact that his mom is supposed to be coming over there to, get the gun. The criteria under, Ron B. Hawkins.
Well, before you get into that, that's a potentially valid basis. I don't remember what Mr. Head says after that. I mean, if you don't play what comes right after that, maybe he says, what gun are you talking about? I've never owned a gun.
So he doesn't, after that's said, he goes silent, and he just moves on to the top.
Okay.
He doesn't talk about his stuff being moved anymore. Which was what initiated her to say that, where he's asking, should I just have Trey come get my stuff? And that's why.
And she says, your mom's getting it.
Right.
Okay. And then what's at 12:34?
I'll withdraw that part. I don't think that falls under.
Okay,
Exceptions.
I agree. Mr. King, so the one excerpt from call 2 comes in just before the 6-minute mark. You've heard what the exchange is. Same argument or different argument?
So I just want to make sure I understand what the state is saying. They're saying that because someone else, an adopted admission by who?
I'm not going to make the state's argument. I'm not sure. I think I understand it, but okay.
The adopted admission would be the defendant is adopting what Ms. Drain said, because there's no response to disputing it, which is what the whole point of 801 D2D is.
So your client says, having heard it, your client says, do I need to just tell Trey to come get my stuff? Different word, but that's what he says. And in response, Ms. Drain says, your mom's on her way now to get the gun. And there's silence. And then Mr. Head goes in a different direction. And so the argument is, if there wasn't a gun and Mr. Head wasn't okay with his mom getting it, then he'd be saying, I don't know what you're talking about. That's the adoptive admission argument, as I understand it.
And I think that's exactly what it is. It's an argument, but it's completely unclear. He says stuff. We don't know what stuff is. He's gonna try to make the argument that stuff is a gun, and which in Ms. Drain says something different. How do we know that it just didn't change the subject? And he doesn't have the right to, or the obligation to testify here and so you're basically adopting something that you don't really know if that's the truth, especially because the first thing my client says doesn't have anything to do with a gun. So if he would have brought up a gun in the beginning, and then she said it, and then he was silent, then maybe I would understand that.
Well, the argument you're making is complicated by the fact that one of the excerpts that Mr. Abate wants to play is an exchange between your client and Ms. Drain, where your client criticizes Ms. Drain's inability to talk in code while they're communicating. So I hear you that when he says shit, he doesn't say gun. But then in a subsequent call, it is revealed to those who might be listening that Mr. Head had made pretty clear to Ms. Drain, there's certain things you need to say in code. So I don't know what exactly Mr. Head meant when he said, should I tell Trey to get my stuff?
That's the point, Judge. We don't know. And
Okay.
he says stuff, and unless he created a key for what code we're talking about, I see you scratching your head, Judge, on that. But then we still don't know.
Okay.
And you're letting the state take a leap when we really don't know. And the whole thing about the code, hey, I wish you wouldn't have said it, but unless you explain what that code is, then it's still speculation.
Okay.
That's way too far, please. Come on, throw me a bone.
I'm gonna hold off on number 2. Let's go to number 3.
Your Honor, that would start 30 seconds into the recorded phone call. The defendant asked Ms. Drain, Trey's phone number. Ms. Drain says, well, I'm not gonna give it to you, but it's right next to me. And she hands him the phone, and 54 seconds into the phone call, prior to what I sent the email, the defendant asked Trey, what's up, or what's going on, or something like that. And Trey's response, based on the question he's asked by the defendant, is, I was fixing to get the gun and take it to your dad's, and, or dad's, excuse me, and the defendant's response is, hey, 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 and it goes kind of quiet or silence, and then they pick back up. The hey, 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 and the silence is cue to Trey. We ain't talking about this.
Okay.
Well,
So
you know,
just so you know, I want to hear from you, but this to me seems similar to call one, different actor. It's now Trey who is, instead of saying stuff, he's saying gun, and it's the reaction his statement has on your client. So you know how I'm gonna rule on that unless you've got a different, I want you to make the record, so please do, but know that if it's the same argument that you made to call one, I find that it falls into the Gates versus State category of, it's not, was in fact Trey going to take the gun and give it to the dad? It sounds like that was a possibility based on what Ms. Drain said. Set that aside. Doesn't matter. It's the effect of him talking about the gun on your client and him saying, "Shh, don't talk about that."
Judge, it's the same argument. And I mean, is the state gonna be able to argue that this came at the initiation of my client in like their closing or something like that, just because he says these don't talk about guns?
That what came at the initiation of your client?
This passing around of this firearm.
I don't know what the state's going to argue, but it, hopefully it's supported by the evidence.
I hope so too.
Okay. And if it's not, I know someone who can object.
I don't like to do that, Judge. That's why I like to object on front and
All right.
so I don't interrupt my learned colleague.
Okay. Call 4. So 1 and 3, the excerpts you've described, those can be played. 4, that may, one of them I listened to, it's just Ms. Drain going off on, I'm not gonna, I mean, there's some of this stuff about STDs. I don't know that you ought to be playing that.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. The call starts at 4:05.
Yep.
When it started, and it says they were in a conversation. She said something about, you done cheated on me, followed by the rest of the call, for approximately 30 seconds where they start talking about, where she starts talking about the gun. The minute she references gun, he hangs the phone up. And so nothing about the STDs is on that. But the reason that call is relevant and the state would argue important and falls under the exception is because call number 5, if you start from the beginning, the defendant says right after it, directly after call number 4, the defendant says to Drain, can you please stop talking over the phone? Don't say nothing over the phone about this case, about the case.
Okay.
And she says, I didn't say nothing about the case. And
I heard it. The problem with call 4 is the lead in. The 30 seconds is really colorful. And then there's finally gun way at the end. I don't know that all the other stuff is, I hope it's not true, but you're not offering for truth of the matter. So it's bad character evidence.
having STDs.
You've listened to it. You've heard what she said. She is not saying charitable things about Mr. Head.
I don't disagree with you. It was my memory, and I could be wrong. Like you said, I did send this at 1:20 in the morning, but the last 30 seconds, there's not any mention of venereal disease or AIDS or anything of that nature. She's saying you cheated on me. And then she does go on like a tirade about how she doesn't like him. And then there he is, and says, but I'll still get the gun to your mom. And he hangs up immediately. And that brings context to why he called back.
I got the call 5, and I don't have an issue with call 5 because it's limited to, you can't talk about the case on the phone. You're doing a bad job with that. She said, what are you talking about? Oh, right. I did say something because it's right after she had said gun.
Correct.
5 is fine. I don't know that you need the full 30 seconds need is the wrong word. I don't think it's appropriate to play that full 30 seconds.
I don't disagree with you.
Okay.
All I want is the gun part. I don't care about the rest of it.
Okay. For the same reason that I'm allowing in 1 and 3, I would allow in 4 if you limit it to the tail end of her tirade.
Yes.
Okay. You should lodge what objections you have to that, Mr. King. But I'm making it clear, whoever is queuing this up for the state needs to move past. It was a lot of sailor talk in there. And that needs to not be played because it's not relevant. And it gets into what I think many jurors might view as bad character evidence that is not relevant to a crime of violence.
100%.
Okay.
Agreed, Your Honor. And when we finish this and we have our short break, I'll make sure that I listen to that call at 4:05 and then make sure I go all the way up to the end of the 30 seconds and just get the relevant portion that we're discussing right now.
Okay. Mr. King, same objection. All right. Call 6. I didn't understand the theory behind the first excerpt. The second excerpt, which is the you don't talk well in code, that I've got. Why it's Mr. Head who starts it anyway, so it's his statement. But what's the purpose of getting in Mama Dunn got the police report and what follows that?
That Your Honor provides context as to why Mr. Head says you can't talk in code for shit, in the sense that what initiates her to talk about the case or say something that involves the case is because Mr. Head says, my mom done got the police report, they don't got anything. And she says something about discovery and he responds. And then that's when he says, you don't know how to talk in code. I can tighten that up if on the break and.
Okay. If the essence of call 6, Mr. King, is the exchange initiated by your client about Ms. Drain's inability to talk in code, what's your hearsay or other objection to that?
What exactly are they putting in Ms. Drain? Because obviously as a client, my client as a party, I have no.
Right. She says it is at this point too difficult to talk in code. She says something like, I don't know, I didn't mess up. Oh, right, I did. It's too difficult to talk in code.
Well,
I don't think that's the truth of the matter. So is it difficult or not? That's not the
but the problem is, that's one that you don't need context for, because you already have his statement. So if they want to play his statement, what do you need her statement for? So at that point, that whole exception goes out of the window with that argument, because he actually makes a full sentence on what I'm assuming they would want to play that.
What is Ms. Drain's response to Mr. Head's criticism of her code talking skills have to do? How would that? I don't know that it's hearsay, but how is it relevant?
I mean, I guess I'm not gonna worry about what she says.
Okay, so why don't you stop it after he delivers his critique about talking in code? Because I think, Mr. King, you're right. It's nothing to do with these hearsay exceptions. It would then be, I don't think it's necessarily hearsay because it's not being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. I don't see how it's relevant to your point. Mr. Head has said what he said, and whether she says, no, I'm great at code or I'm bad at code, who cares?
My argument, just to add up, I apologize, the reason it's relevant, because it goes to show that they've had prior conversations about talking in code, and she's telling him it's too difficult to talk in code about this. That's what I believe is relevant.
And that's the argument, but not necessarily the, and therefore is actually for a truthful purpose, what she's saying. And therefore it actually is hearsay.
So we're going to stop after Mr. Head says what he says about Ms. Drain's code talking abilities. And number 7, I listened, I couldn't, you're withdrawing that one? Okay. All right, and I'm going to exclude call 2. So 1, I'm admitting the segment you've identified in your email. 3, I'm admitting the segment you've identified in your email. 4 can come in per your commitment, Mr. Abate, that you're playing just the tail end of Ms. Drain's screed at Mr. Head, where she says something about the gun, click, he hangs up. 5, you will play, if you choose to, up through him saying, don't say nothing over the phone about this case. And then we talked about 6, where you start at 52 seconds and we get through Mr. Head critiquing Ms. Drain's code talking. Does that make sense?
Yes, call 2, I thought your honor's ruling was.
Oh, at 156.
5,
Oh.
call 2, 5:59.
Yeah.
Your mama's on, and then I would stop there.
No, I held off on 2 until we got through everything. I deferred ruling on 2. My ruling on 2 is don't play 2.
Can I respond to your honor?
Sure.
So call number 2 is incredibly relevant because Ray was on the stand and said that he never went to Ms. Drain's house, that he had no involvement with the gun.
I'm letting you play 3 where Trey says I was fixing to get the gun and take it to your dad's. 2, which is arguably cumulative, and is something that Mr. King asked nicely to have thrown his way.
I was looking at the wrong call.
Okay,
My eyes
it's okay. So call 2, please do not play. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, some of them a little bit edited. No 7, no 2. I promised everyone they could have a break. Ms. Fagan, did you want to add anything? Still no bone in any of this, but I don't want to exclude you from it.
No.
Okay. Let's take deputies 3-4 minute break and let the defendants and their lawyers and the prosecutors do what they need to do. One last thing. This is your last witness.
Yes, sir.
So the state will be resting. The jurors are going to go home after that. We will cover a bunch of things that we need to when the state rests. During our little break here, I will print out a draft charge and we can take a longer break after the jury goes, but we will have our charge conference today as well, assuming we're having a charge conference. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, that is team work. You know, international search when trying to come up with these names. King on where it takes. King, K. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
Yes, sir.
do we have a, is there any law, like an attorney lounge or library? I can't remember.
Attorney Ron?
Yeah. Library.
There may be one. May not be open. It's now family law center.
Oh, yeah.
It's on 7th.
7th.
Yes, sir.
Sure. 100%.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Right.
Will you, Mr. Rao, come grab these, please? 2 for you, 1 for each defense attorney. You're welcome. Nothing like a good jury charge.
Yeah, love it.
My favorite part of the trial. You like it when the lawyers, I think it's only in civil though, lawyers will say, you don't need to take down the charge conference. Oh, no, I want you to. There are sometimes lawyers like, you don't need to take it down, especially on the civil side. All right, there he is. Great. Sarge, once we get the defendants out, I'll just take everyone's pulse, but we should be ready for the jurors. Mr. Rivers, you ready? Mr. Abate, did you have enough time to prep your audio files?
Yes. Yes.
Anything we need to do before the jurors come in?
No, can I just ask one point of clarity
Yes?
on the call about you can't talk in code? Sorry, I don't.
That's number 6.
Yes, do I stop there or can I get in what Ms. Crane says?
No, just when Mr. Head says, offers his critique, that's where we stop, as close as you can stop. Mr. King, anything else before we bring the jurors in?
Not right now. No.
Ms. Fagan?
Nothing.
Okay, let's bring them in, please. Thank you, Sergeant. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, from your afternoon break. We covered the things we needed to, gave everyone a quick break, and I'm going to ask Mr. Abate to call his next witness.
Take a call, Mr. Grant Root.
I do. All right. First name is Grant, Grant. Last name is Rood, Rood.
Good afternoon, Mr. Root.
Good afternoon.
Could you please tell the jurors how you are currently employed?
I'm employed as an assistant district attorney in the Fulton County DA's office.
And how long have you been employed with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office?
As of now, 6 years.
And can you tell the jurors back in 2019, what were you assigned to a specific unit?
Yes, I was in the major case unit in the DA's office, which is the unit that handles homicides and cases like that.
And are you still part of or assist with that unit?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors what you did in that unit?
At the time, I worked on the indictments of the case, so we'd get the case file from the relevant police agency for all our homicide cases. We'd work with the agencies on the cases, interview additional witnesses, re-interview additional witnesses. And part of that duty was also to listen to jail calls made by defendants in the cases.
Okay. And as part of that unit, were you assigned to work on or do an independent investigation upon receiving a case file from the Atlanta Police Department concerning Xavier Head and Kyrie Black?
Yes, I was.
And tell the jurors, what did you do first as a part of that investigation?
First thing you do, or I did in this case, was just review the file, review all of the videos, review any recordings, review any evidence that was available at that time.
Okay, and as a part of your duties, do you also attempt to collect any evidence as it pertains to the case?
Yes.
And is one of those items jail phone calls?
Yes.
Now, if you can tell the jurors, where is the Fulton County Jail located?
For men are held at the Fulton County Jail at 901 Rice Street in Atlanta, Fulton County.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors what kind of phone systems that they have at the Fulton County Jail for inmates in the jail to use?
So inmates, there's phones that they can use to make outside calls to family, friends, so on and so forth. And it's a system maintained by a company called Securus Technologies out of Texas. They maintain those calls, maintain the database of those phone calls, and I have access to those calls to where I can listen to them and also download them to my computer to later use in court if need be.
Okay. And who is Securus?
It's a company.
Okay. Is it a private owned company?
I believe so.
Okay. And is every call that is made using the Securus system from the Fulton County Jail recorded?
All calls are recorded except those which fall under privilege. So if an inmate, for example, makes a call to his lawyer, those calls are privileged. And so those calls are not recorded. So I don't have access to those calls.
Okay.
But calls made to family and friends, I have access to, and they're recorded.
And the calls that you're able to access, every call other than calls made to an attorney, are they recorded at the time, the exact time the inmate makes the call?
Yes.
And after a call is made and recorded, is there a means or a way for you to obtain those calls?
Yes.
And are those calls kept in the normal course of business with Securus?
Yes.
And have you been trained with using the Securus system?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury a little bit about your training with the Securus phone system?
I've received training from the people at Securus at how their system operates, how inmates use it, how to download calls, how to search for calls, how to tell from what area in the jail calls are made from, depending on how it's tagged when you download it, the various types of calls. So I've received training in how to use it and how the system operates.
And who can log into the Securus system?
I mean, I have a login and password provided to me by Securus.
And is that password and login, is it unique only to you?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors how you're able to download these recorded phone calls?
So once you find a call, and there's various ways of finding calls, once you locate a call, it's relatively simple. You just click on it and download it, just like you would download a file from your email or from a website or something like that. So the actual process of downloading the calls is quite simple.
Okay. Now, once these calls that are recorded that you're able to download, are you able to alter them in any way?
No.
And through using the system, how long have you been using the system?
Pretty much my whole time at the DA's office, so 6 years.
And in those 6 years, have you been able to verify through your experiences that the system works?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can you explain to the jurors how the phone system actually works, which allows the inmate to make calls from the jail?
So when an inmate is first booked in, or when they're booked in, at a certain point, they get a unique ID called a jail ID. It's unique to that inmate. It'd be like a social security number or a driver's license, and only that person would have that ID, that number. And from there, they can make calls from that account if there's money on that account, or they can make collect calls. But when they're first booked in, it takes a little bit of time to get the jail ID, so they can make free calls from the booking area to friends and family or whoever, and then they can make the booking calls. They can also use other people's IDs or other people's account. So if you think of it like almost like a card, you can give the card to your friend, and they can make calls from that. So they can make a call from the booking area, They can make a call using another person's ID, or they can make a call using their own ID.
And before the inmate makes a phone call or the phone call is connected, are they warned that this phone call is being recorded?
Yes.
Okay. Are there signs within the jail near the phones that are used within the Fulton County Jail that says that these calls are recorded?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay. Now, can you explain to the jurors how you are able to find or search for jail calls for any specific inmate?
So as I stated earlier, they have an ID, a unique ID. So if you can search by that ID to see the amount of calls and which calls are placed on that ID. And it'll list various details, including where the call was made from, the ID, and to whom the call was to. So it'll list the phone number they're calling. And then what you can do if you want to find other calls made to that phone number is search just by that phone number to see if someone made calls to that number using a different ID or maybe at the booking area, just to see and cover their bases or cover our bases and make sure we have all the calls potentially made by a certain inmate.
And how are you able to link a particular call to a particular defendant?
So when they're booked in and given that ID, they have to go through a voice verification process where they read off usually a sheet of paper, read some stock sentences for voice verification and recognition. And so we can listen to that voice verification to ensure that, it's person A who's using person A's ID and not some other person. And also we listen to the calls and you can sometimes tell from the context who that person is. And, at a certain point you get familiar with that person's voice.
And the booking number that you referenced, does that number correspond with biographical information that the defendant gives at the time that they're booked into custody?
It's assigned by the jail.
Okay. When they're assigned that number at the jail, does the jail also take the biographical information for the inmate and then pairs that with the booking number?
Yes, and I can see that biographical information.
Now tell the jurors how you use the booking number in correlation with the secure system.
So you can search, once you have the booking number, you just search by the booking number. You can also search by the defendant's name. And I use both just in case the name is misspelled in the system. So it's just a way of searching for that inmate's calls because they're booked under that booking number and the calls are from that account, from that number.
So is the booking number the same number or as the securest account number?
Their jail ID number, yeah.
And explain the purpose of why the jail ID number and the securest account number are correlated or the same.
But so that which calls, they're making money on it, so they know which calls are coming from that account.
Is it a form of verification that the defendant who was booked in under that number is making the calls?
Yes.
Now, what can you do with that information?
With the jail ID?
Yes.
You can search for the calls and also ensure that if you think a certain person is making the calls, you can see where they are booked in and you can see on Securus where the call was coming from. So it's another layer of verification that, the person whose calls you're trying to listen to are actually that person.
Now, in this specific case involving specifically Xavier Head, can you tell the jurors what you did as it relates to using the secure system?
Yes, so I identified Xavier Head's his jail ID to then start listening to those calls made from that ID. I listened to his voice verification to get familiar with his voice. And then after that, once I determined, certain calls were made to certain numbers, then I reverse searched by that phone number to see if there were any calls made from the booking area or from other persons' accounts to that phone number by Xavier Head.
And after you did that, were you able to locate calls that were made by Xavier Head?
Yes.
And after you get or download those calls, let me ask you this question. When you download those calls, does the secure system indicate what number is being called?
Yes.
And when you see that number, do you then do, for lack of better words, investigation into who that number belongs to?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jurors how you're able to do that?
Using a variety of resources. One of the resources is actually in Securus. Recipients who are receiving phone calls can actually register their number with their name so that you can see, if they've done that, you can see their name pop up on the system of the person they're calling.
And when you are using the secure system, is it through the internet online?
Yes.
And is when you're on online going through Securus and the phone calls to any specific inmate, are you then able to download those onto a CD or a jump drive?
Yes.
And when you download the specific calls, can you set a date range and things of that nature?
You can, you specify which calls to download.
Can you specify what specific, you specify for the system to pull all the calls made to one number?
Yes.
And can you just pull all of the calls that were made?
Yes.
Okay. And when you download these calls and download them onto a disk or a jump drive or your hard drive, can you make any changes, alterations, deletions to those calls?
Not to those calls.
Okay. And why is that?
I mean, it's a secure system, or supposed to be a secure system, so we're not editing the phone calls. It's supposed to be just, that's what was said, so that's what will be played.
And when you download the calls, does the secure system for each specific call not only identify, you said the phone number that's called, but the duration of the call,
Yes.
as well as the date and time of the call?
Yes.
And does it also identify what inmate is making the phone call?
It identifies from which account is making the phone call.
Okay. And when you are listening to the beginning of every call, does the call indicate through these stop recordings that you mentioned earlier who it is?
Yes.
Okay. And do you actually hear a snippet of the voice of the inmate's account that is being used?
Correct. Yeah.
Now, I want to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 173. And you recognize Exhibit 173?
Yes, I do.
And have you had an opportunity to review State's 173?
Yes.
Did you actually create State's Exhibit 173?
Yes, I did.
And are your initials on the exhibit sticker of 173?
Yes, they are.
And what is State's Exhibit 173?
It's a USB flash drive containing certain calls made by Xavier Head.
And does the flash drive contain the same calls that you pulled related to Xavier Head's Securus account?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, the state would tender what's been marked as State's Exhibit 173 into evidence.
Ms. Fagan, any objection to 173?
No objection.
Mr. King, other than discussions we've had outside the presence of the jury, any objection to 173?
No additional objection.
Your prior objections are preserved. 173 is admitted.
Thank you, Judge. Now, Mr. Rude, and on your screen, displaying the contents of the State's Exhibit 173. Can you explain to the jurors what they're looking at?
Sure. This is the, it's what you see once you download the calls, and you can play the calls from here and see all the details about those calls that's saved in terms of where the call was made from, that being the Fulton County Jail, the date and time it was called. The called party is which was the receiving number, so who the inmate called, the duration, which is in seconds, the originating area. So if, for example, the booking area will say booking. If they're on a certain floor of the Fulton County Jail, it'll say that floor. And so that's what it says, that 6N, that means on the 6th floor. And it says the name here, for example, where it says Xavier Head, it means it was made from the account of Xavier Head. And then the account number, and then the last column is the ending status. Did it end because they ran out of time, because calls are limited to a certain amount of time, or did the person who was making the call hang up the phone to end the call?
Now, Mr. Rude, in where it says index and you see the second call, you
Yes,
see where in the State's Exhibit, in State's Exhibit 173, where it says booking B3.
yes, I do.
What does that mean?
It means the call was made from the booking area of the Fulton County Jail.
And if you're in the booking area, is that the day or you were arrested?
It's usually the day or the day after they're arrested and before they're assigned to a specific cell.
Okay. And when was that phone call made? Or when was the booking call made here for the second call?
Yeah, it was made at on August 16th, 2019 at 9:07 a.m.
And through your investigation, who was the call made to?
It was made to Asia Drain.
And were you able to determine by doing preparation for the case being presented to a grand jury, find out who Asia Drain was?
Yes,
And who was she in regards to Defendant Xavier Head?
she was the girlfriend of Xavier Head.
And Mr. Rude, where in the beginning of this call, where I apologize, where at the beginning of this call, when it said this jail call is being made from, and you hear a silence, why is that as it pertains to the booking call?
The person who's making the call, for whatever reason, didn't say their name, or didn't say what they're calling about at the prompt.
And at that point, has the stock voice recordings that are required, have they been done?
No.
Now, Mr. Root, is that the warning or prompt that is given before every call is connected that the defendant makes, either from the bookend area or from other areas on each floor of the Fulton County Jail?
Yes.
Okay. So I am going to move State's Exhibit or the second call on the index in State's Exhibit 173 to 2 minutes and 30 seconds for the record. Okay, and I want to show you. And as to where it says the number 8 on the jail, the Securus Index, what date was that call made?
The call was made on, August 17th, 2019 at 8:01 PM.
And who was this call made to?
Same number, 678-457-7399.
And is that number associated with Miss Asia Drain?
Yes.
Your Honor, there's not any way to turn the system up, the sound system up anymore. Is there?
It's always asked. And I will tell you with calls, sometimes you've got the two different speakers left and right. I don't know. You control it through the podium computer. So that's at 100.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like it's splitting the signal.
And in the index, under where you see number 25, who is that call made to and on what date?
Call 25 is made on August 20th, 2019 at 9:55 a.m. to that same number, 678-457-7399.
For the record, I'm going to fast forward the call to 4 minutes and 29 seconds. Well, 28 seconds. And what date and time was the phone call under the index number 26 made?
It was the next phone call, August 20th, 2019 at 3:34.
Okay, so the same day?
Yes. It's to the same.
And under the index column, under 127, can you tell the jurors what number is that phone call made to?
Call 127 is made on September 5th, 2019 at 7:06 p.m. to 678-457-7399.
Same number that you were able to determine is associated with Ms. Drain?
Yes.
And Ms. Root, after you completed your part of the independent investigation after receiving the file from the Atlanta Police Department. Did that conclude your part in this case?
I mean, I'm still involved in it to this day,
Okay. Is that because we ask you a lot of questions all the time?
all the time.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Ms. Fagan, do you have any questions for Mr. Rude?
Just a couple. So besides the phone calls, you also represented the state for this case in the preliminary hearing?
Honestly cannot recall.
So you don't remember Detective Berry being on the stand for the preliminary hearing and you represented the state?
I believe I was there. I can't remember if I was there witnessing or whether I was representing the state.
Okay, well, do you recall that there was only one witness, Detective Berry?
At the preliminary hearing, I believe so.
Okay, so you weren't a witness at the preliminary hearing?
No.
No, Jeff, at this point, he says he doesn't recall.
Well, he's responded in a different manner to the last few questions.
And at the preliminary hearing, though, Javante Rivers was charged with murder, correct?
I mean, that's not how a preliminary hearing works. But
Well, at the preliminary hearing, Javante Rivers was sitting at the defense table charged with murder, correct?
Your Honor, at this point, I'm gonna object to relevance.
What's the relevance?
Well, I definitely think it's relevant. It's come up in this case quite often.
What's the relevance? The fact that it's come up doesn't mean that it was relevant before.
Well, moving forward, it was just one question after that, if I can get a little bit.
Well, you don't have to answer that question. What's your next question?
Does he, well, Miss ADA Rude had no involvement in dismissing the charge against Mr. Rivers?
That's a question?
That's the question.
Did you have any involvement in the decision to dismiss the charges against Mr. Rivers?
to not proceed, yes.
You did,
Yes, I had involvement in it.
but you didn't dismiss the charges, right?
I mean, that's the decision of the district attorney, the elected district attorney.
I understand. I'm asking you about yourself. You represented the state at the preliminary hearing, but you were not dismissing the charges against Javante Rivers at that point, correct?
I really cannot recall exactly at the preliminary hearing what charges were found and probable cause and so forth on which defendants.
Mr. King, do you have any questions for Mr. Rude?
No.
Any follow-up, Mr. Abate?
I just have one. Mr. Rude, if a judge is to not find probable cause on charges as related to a defendant, what happens?
I mean, if the judge isn't at the probable cause hearing, the state can move forward with charges still, or we can not move forward with charges.
But at that point, if a judge was to find no probable cause against or for charges in which a defendant was arrested for, at that point, the charges, for all intents and purposes, go away.
Correct.
But we can continue to pursue them if need be.
Yes.
Any questions from the jurors for Mr. Rude? Yes.
Your Honor, if I could have one recross.
Why don't you ask the question and I'll let you know if Mr. Rude needs to answer it.
After the preliminary hearing, the state continued to pursue charges against Mr. Rivers at that point, correct?
Certain charges, yes.
Sarge, if you could collect the cards, please. Thank you. Counsel? Mr. Root, going into the preliminary hearing for Mr. Rivers, do you know what he had been charged with, arrested for?
Yes.
And what would that be?
Murder.
When Mr. Rivers's preliminary hearing was over, what charges, if any, remained for Mr. Rivers, if you recall?
I honestly do not recall whether certain charges were dismissed or kept.
Is Mr. Rivers indicted now for murder in this case?
No, he's not.
Was he indicted for murder in this case?
No.
Mr. Abate, do you have any follow-up based on my exchange with Mr. Root?
Just one question, Your Honor. If after a probable cause hearing, or after a probable cause hearing, a judge was to find no probable cause for, let's say, murder charges, does that have anything to do with you?
No.
Is the only person who makes that determination the judge who oversees the preliminary hearing?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question and then Ms. Fagan, you can go. I wasn't that judge.
That's correct.
That's a question.
That's
question?
Yes. that is
Okay.
correct.
What
All
do you recall?
All right,
No,
Ms.
I know
Fagan.
You were though invited and you were a part of indicting this case though, right?
Yes.
You actually helped indict this case, right?
Yes.
And so after a dismissal occurred, you recharged Mr. Rivers, correct?
Not with murder.
But you charged him, correct?
Yes.
And after he was charged, those charges weren't dismissed until Monday when the shots up,
Is that a question?
correct?
I don't know. I'm a witness. I really don't know if those charges were or were not dismissed. I really don't know.
Mr. King. All right, Mr. Root, thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Abate, state's next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the state of Georgia rests.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the state has rested. That is the case in chief of the state. There are now a whole bunch of things that I need to cover with both sides that you don't need to be here for. In fact, you can't be here for. We'll finish with that after 5 o'clock, so I'm not going to make you stick around. But I do need you to be back here at 9 on Monday We are on track to get you the case on Monday, but I do need you to be back here at 9 on Monday, so we can see what the next steps are in the trial. Any logistical questions about that? The weekend is yours to do with as you see fit. Don't come here. It'll be locked. Even the jury room, no free coffee over the weekend. This is a long break, well-deserved for you all, but it's important that throughout the weekend, even though folks who maybe didn't see a lot of you this week will be saying, what's it like? What'd you learn? What are you thinking? Don't engage. Say, I will tell you what I'm thinking when we're done, and then you can tell them all about it. But over the weekend, it's real important that you not engage in any outside research or, thank you, do anything that might cause folks to talk to you about their thoughts about the process, this case, or anything like that. Okay? Appreciate everyone's attention this week. We do have a question. Yes, sir. Well, we need to be done on Monday because some folks need to be places on Tuesday. But if we're not done on Monday, towards the end of Monday, we'll talk about what that means. Okay? But everyone can be here Monday. I mean, that was part of the commitment when you said, I'm willing to serve, and then you won the lottery and got selected. Okay? It stays here, right? It stays in the jury room. Do not take your notes home. Thank you. Thank you.